Now you're ready to build your first truss for phase one of our design process. So what you need right now is a piece of scratch paper that you're going to find on the central table. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, doesn't need to be graph paper, anything like that. You're going to need a ruler, you're going to need a writing utensil, and you're also going to need your truss dimensions. Now I have printed mine out. Yours are going to be on canvas. But keep in mind that you are creating one of these two and your partner will create the other two. So I'm going to go through modeling the first one all the way through the process, but the idea is going to be the same regardless of the trust that you have. All right, let's get it going. So we've got our scratch paper, and now what we're trying to do is we are going to create our footprint. So I'm just going to do the first one as an example, just your basic triangle footprint that we're dealing with. So it looks like we have dimensions of 9.75. Halfway is going to be 4.875. So I'll just kind of mark that. And then we're told it goes up, what, 2.75? So I'm going to try to keep it as straight as possible. So this tells me the top of my truss. And then I'm just going to connect those dots from here all the way down, like so. And then same thing over on this side. There we go. Let's see if I can focus on this a little bit better. Okay. So there's the basic footprint of the truss, which is all fine and dandy, but what we really want to do is we want to also put the thickness of our balsa in there so that we know exactly what angles we should cut. So what I do for this is a couple things that we could do. I could kind of use this as a ruler if I really wanted to. I think I'm just going to grab the straight up thickness. I'm just going to draw like a little mark, maybe right here, maybe over here, so I can connect those with a ruler in just a little bit. So that kind of shows the thickness of my balsa at those 2 points. And I'm going to do the same thing for these guys up here as well. Just a couple of little lines. Again, if you want to just draw it all the way through, you can, but the balsa is a little bit bendy. Probably not great to use as a straight edge. And then let's just quickly connect those lines. So this will help us decide what we want those angles to kind of look like. So I'm just going to draw like a light line all the way through on all these guys. And typically the fewer cuts we make, the better off it's going to be. The less angles, we're probably going to be okay. All right. So I'm going to plan this out real quick. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase a couple of these lines. Is I'm just going to try to just cut here for the bottom guy. Kind of the same thing on this side, so we only have to cut a couple times there. So I'm going to have a joint that goes straight across like so. And then up at the top, this one might be a little bit more difficult. I'm probably going to have them join just kind of straight up in that space right there. So now that we have our footprint pretty much ready to go, we are ready to grab some balsa and start taping some stuff down. Now we need a few supplies. You're going to have to go over to our shelf and grab a carpet knife, uh, either a cutting board or an old piece of tile. And we're also going to need a little bit of tape to attach our balsa to your actual footprint. So obviously the first thing we need to do is grab your cutting board or your tile, and we're going to slip this under here because we're going to be doing some cutting with that little carpet knife. And I am going to tape some balsa down. Now, our masking tape is relatively good, unless we're using the dollar store stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take some of this tape and I'm going to stick it onto my jeans. I'm not going to show you on the camera. And just pull it off. And what that does is it grabs some of the little particles of your jean and makes it a little bit less sticky. So we want this to stay down, but we don't want it to, rip up our balsa because it's pretty darn fragile. I'm just going to tape it in a couple of places so that we can cut it pretty accurately. And probably more importantly, we can glue it down. So I'm going to stick a little bit there. I'm going to stick a little bit there. Just kind of butt up to the side of that thing like so. And there we go. Okay, now we've already kind of pre-drawn our angles of where we want to cut. So I'm just going to kind of follow that. I'm going to go right along the line like so and just be kind of gentle with it. It's all right if we cut into the paper because we don't really care about that. And I'm going to kind of wrap around, do the same thing over here on the other side. And just kind of slice exactly along the footprint that we did. And because we did kind of the thickness of the balsa, that's going to make it a little bit more accurate when we start to put the other pieces together. So let's kind of do the same thing. I'm going to grab a little bit more tape, and I'm going to do the other sides. So I'm going to kind of actually prop this up right there, so I kind of know where I want to cut. So let's do a piece of tape about right here or so. And then this is going to be kind of laying on top, which is fine, as long as we kind of take that into account. Okay. That looks pretty good. Let's do the same thing. Let's make sure that these two are matching up pretty well. If I were actually doing this, I would probably rotate a little bit so I can cut it better, but I'm going to cut it such that these two end up pretty flush with each other. Actually, it looks pretty good right there. And then I want my top joint, I'm just going to go straight up right there. Okay. Now, if we take that last piece, hopefully it's the same angle as this little guy. So maybe I can do one last cut. And then let's do one last round of tape and cut off that last little joint right there. Like so. Maybe a little bit down there. So again, notice how it's kind of propped up on here. That's going to allow me to get like a really nice angle. So I just chop it right where those two line up. Yeah, and they're going to stick just like that. So now that we have our footprint ready to go, now it's time to glue. So you're going to need to put a dime-sized amount of wood glue on a little paper towel, and you'll need a little balsa bit so you can use as kind of a paintbrush. So I'm just going to get a little tiny bit, and sorry that's washed out, and I'm going to bend my balsa wood and just put a little tiny amount on the part that's going to contact the other section of the balsa. Now, what's important about the wood glue is that's going to add weight to your truss, which is typically not good. So you want to put on as little as possible. And ideally, if I taped it well enough together, there should be enough tension where it kind of pinches in place and it'll dry overnight. So I'm going to do the same thing kind of in the bottom right corner. Put a little tiny bit of glue on there and kind of pinch it so that it will tack together, get rid of any excess glue, and then kind of finish up over on the left side as well. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of that balsa on my balsa bit paintbrush, bend it up a little bit, and get some of that wood glue in there so I know it'll stick pretty nicely. Again, that's going to add a lot of weight, so you don't want to use a ton of wood glue when you're putting this on. Okay, not too shabby. Now, the next thing you're going to grab is a gusset template. Now, these gussets, we're going to cut these out, and these are going to be glued on all of the little joints. So we've got our top joint, we've got our left joint, and we've got our right joint. And these are just to ensure that your truss breaks on the members and not on the joints themselves. So once again, I'm going to grab a little bit of glue, and I'm going to kind of put it on the outside where I know the gusset is going to go. So you can see I'm just kind of painting in the area right there. I'm just going to slap on a gusset so it goes over the joint. Really, the big part you have to worry about is where the joint actually is. And again, this will protect your truss from breaking at the joint because really we want it to break at the members. So get a little bit of glue, kind of paint it onto that section right there, put on a gusset. And then one more time. I didn't plan this one out very well. I kind of put my tape a little bit too close to that joint up top. So I may just have to put a little less glue in that spot, which is not a big deal. Again, around the joint is the big part that you need to worry about. So get some of that glue. It's kind of drying up right now, and then stick the gusset in that spot. Now you're going to want this to dry overnight. And I usually just wait for the gussets the next day. You can kind of go either way. This is where it gets really dangerous. I need to peel off that masking tape. And hopefully you took off a little bit of that sticky from your pants or whatever. So I like to put a finger on the balsa itself as I pull everything up because the last thing I want is that balsa to break because I essentially have to start over. And that is never a good feeling. So be very, very, very careful in this part right here. And ideally, I'm going to do that for all of those pieces of masking tape, but I'm not going to waste your time. The last thing, once everything's dry, is to grab some razor blades because more than likely you had a little bit of glue squirt out of the joints and attach your truss onto the paper. So I just like to use my razor blade and I just very carefully cut in between the paper and my truss and try to slice off some of that glue. Be very careful with these razor blades because they can be super sharp. So notice how I've successfully separated those out without cutting the actual truss. And do the same thing for the last ones and you're good to go.